Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Got a Case of Wanderlust podcast. I'm your host, Lydia, and today I am honored to be joined by conscious travel consultant and entrepreneur Sequoia Armstrong, who is the founder of the travel planning organization Puebla York and host of the Soul Wanderer podcast. Puebla York designs custom travel experiences in Japan and Mexico centered around cultural connection, environmental sustainability, and conscious travel, which we will definitely dive into more with this episode. So I'm really looking forward to our whole conversation today. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, thank you, Lydia. Thank you for having me.
I'm
Hello,
so glad.
everyone.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're here. I love welcoming other fellow travel podcasters and mindful travel people to this show. So, before we dive in, or the first question I ask is, what sparks your wanderlust?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I don't know. I think it's the people. I think it's either seeing people that I've met before or the chance to, when you kind of slow down travel and add, space for spontaneity, you can meet, you never know where that will bring you and who you'll meet. And some of my, I think, best, people interactions have happened from those kind of moments. And I think that's what sparks wanderlust is, the desire to connect as deeply as possible
Mm.
with others. Yeah.
That's the perfect answer. And I had read a little bit about your background traveling, and it sounds like you lived in four different countries.
Yes.
And a lot of your experiences do come from your parents and their also love for travel. So, is that kind of what motivated you to start exploring the world?
Yes, somewhat. I think, well, I grew up in Maui, Hawaii, and so it's one of the most geographically isolated places in the world. And my mother is from Japan, so I would visit, my grandparents and friends and family friends every summer growing up. So I recognize that that's such a privilege as a single mother. She worked really hard. I imagine. I still don't know how she did it. She doesn't even know. I've asked her how she just managed to do that every summer. So I think but she's definitely one of the people probably that encouraged me to travel, like to continue traveling. And ended up going to college, across the country. I really did want to get out of Hawaii. I think I kind of craved and liked the cities, even though sometimes I think as a young child it could have been a little bit overwhelming. And then yeah, studying abroad and traveling, and I don't know. I think I just was always around adults as a child too, so interacting in that way. And yeah, and like I was just telling Lydia, I was just traveling with my mom recently. We travel a lot together. We're very close, and I she loves the traveling part, not as much the flying part, which I love the flying part too. So um, I think if someone is a young child, if someone had encouraged me to maybe become a pilot, that would have been very different. But I did have aspirations as a very young girl to be a flight attendant until I found out about time zones and sort of that it is quite tasking on your body. But I have so much appreciation for right how much it takes for even just one plane to fly.
Absolutely. Like, we don't appreciate customer service workers in general, the amount of behind the scenes work they have to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess I could relate in that sense. I feel like every young person that kind of has that ache to explore and travel, like always a flight attendant is like the goal, you know?
Well,
When you
that's
don't
also,
realize.
yeah, like societal, right? There's like gender norms that were happening. If you're a girl, it was maybe become a flight attendant. It wasn't become a pilot, and that's
Mm,
changing more so these days. When I see a female flight attendant, pilot, I get really excited. I guess like just like female entrepreneur, it doesn't really matter maybe what the gender is, but I know just how there's such a probably there's so few of them. So I think it's just like really exciting when you know that you're flying. I don't know. I find I find it really exciting.
No, 100%. That's such a good point, how we're kind of molded from the very beginning about where we can go, what we can do based off what our gender is. So, do you remember like what motivated you to start solo traveling? Because I think that's also a very stigmatized space for females because of mostly safety reasons, and the
Hmm.
perception that the world is a dangerous place if you're alone as a woman.
That's a really good question, Lydia, and it's definitely a big concern. I've been doing some market research on my own, and that certainly comes up, and that's, I think, a lot of conversations that people, especially women, are having if they do travel somewhere is family members and friends, having comments. Media doesn't really help. But I've been traveling solo since I was a young child, about 7 or 8. My
Solo
father had
traveling.
moved. Yeah. Yeah. I
Whoa.
mean, you're an unaccompanied minor, so there's somebody like helping you. But yeah, my father lived in Colorado, so sometimes twice a year, but at least once a year, I was traveling to
Mm.
another state by myself. And at a certain point, then when I could do the transfer from inter-island in Hawaii to international, I was then traveling to Japan by myself. And of course, there's someone arriving. That's like the beauty of visiting people right? There's someone there to welcome you. But yeah, I started at a pretty young age.
Okay, so automatically you were kind of set up to be a brave traveler.
Independent, yeah, maybe. And being an only child, I mean, there's, I think, a lot of factors of just kind of being content with being alone.
Hmm.
And speaking again to, the flight crew, they were very, very kind to me when I was a child. I mean, even now, of course, but I think I was a little bit coddled as a child
Hmm.
with the flight crew and going in to see, the pilot. You can't really do that anymore, into the cockpit and games and the flight attendants. I think they were just so lovely. That's kind of part of why I wanted to be a flight attendant then. But yeah, so I think, and I think that later, I'm in my late 30s now, but I think that in my 20s, doing more of my different, like planning my own travel before I did what I do now. Or with like friends, or like a portion of it is solo. I like to say that solo travel is not defined by someone else, it's defined by you. You could be flying solo and meeting someone. You could be, a portion of your trip could be solo. So I think that like parts of my trips with friends were even, solo. And I think that really helped with just confidence and being open to the world. And again, like the question you asked in the beginning, it's just like connecting with people.
Hmm. That's so lovely to hear, like having such positive experiences as a child. And also you bring up a good point about how we define terms. It's so subjective based off each person, and like solo travel is one of those. I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious how you define the term conscious travel, and like when did you start becoming more intentional about traveling more responsibly?
But yeah, that's a good question as well. I get that a lot. Sometimes it is challenging. It's sort of, a very like niche part of travel, using terms that people aren't necessarily using. But I know that in this day and age, there are, you know like responsible, sustainable, even it kind of gets thrown around, and not everyone is like sure what it means. So for conscious travel, I think of it more holistically. It's like a bigger picture, is thinking about not just so you the traveler. So it's like, but it's asking those questions to yourself, or I ask clients, is like, why are you choosing to visit this place? What are your interests? And then thinking about the impact on the community that you're visiting, the place that you're visiting, um, because it's their home, right? So, and part of that might have been because I grew up in a tourist destination. But I think it was in those travels in my 20s, when I first started going to Mexico and, grew to love it. It was just thinking more about how can I interact more with locals and support them. The little decisions we make, the little actions we have, can have an impact too.
Absolutely. It all amounts to something, and we leave an impact, whether it's big or small, whether it's positive or negative. So might as well be more intentional about it. So I love that term. And your entire brand, Puebla York, is grounded upon this topic. So, like, have you always wanted to be a travel consultant? And, like, can you kind of describe a little bit about the process behind creating this amazing organization?
Yeah, so I actually know I did not think I would end up as a lifelong traveler and an avid traveler. My mom did work in hospitality in the hotel industry for most of my life. People often, as a teenager, thought I was a hotel concierge, like I was her colleague. But I think, and my husband also has worked in the chef in the hotel industry as well. So, but I didn't actually really have a desire to work in the hotel industry. My background for a large part of my adulthood was working as a server in restaurants. So I think taking care of people is probably something that I've been doing most of my life. But I didn't think that I would work in the travel industry. I also think that the term before I was a travel agent, I think that that never quite resonated of just booking things for people. And I think now that travel advisor or I use travel consultant, I think of it more, I want to just help and guide them. There is education that's involved too, but what something that's my strength is something that really it stresses people out, overwhelms them. Planning, for example. So I actually, the business started out as product based, but then I realized I didn't want to put more things into the world. And so I thought of how could I have a service, and then it kind of became like what comes easily to you. Someone mentioned that, and I was like, I was making it maybe more challenging for myself, um, by digging so deep, but it was actually like right in front of me was creating a travel service, and and specifically focusing on the two places that I are very near and dear to me. I have connections to, but I have, yes, like you said, traveled to many places.
Mm, that's so inspiring how you kind of thought hard about what you want to put out into this world and having it not be materialistic. Because you're right, we really don't need more products, we don't need more factories making things to ultimately what, like, we're gonna leave behind this planet and it's still gonna be here. So I love the idea of creating a service that's so based upon something you're passionate about, such as conscious travel. So the two destinations that you focus on is Japan and Mexico. So what about these two specific destinations make you focus your entire kind of brand upon?
Yeah, and at the time, so it's early 2021 is when I pivoted. Japan was still closed in the pandemic. Japan didn't reopen to tourism until fall of 2022. So that was a whole, actually almost 2 years of my business. Just then it was really only Mexico was really the option. So it was a pretty, I think it was a challenging time, but it was about figuring it out. I saw that you had liked a post where initially I was focusing more on culinary travel, because I worked in the restaurant industry, and I love and I'm so passionate about food. But I think that food can fall under travel better than travel falls under food somehow. Is kind of what I figured out, and it was just really getting to know myself better and how I could serve better. But Japan, I don't know. Like I don't know. I think it was, again, I was making it more difficult for myself by just the most obvious thing. But I've been, traveling there my whole life. And I say that sometimes I think, my Japanese ancestors were probably like, how are you having a business online and you can work from anywhere and you're helping people travel here, right? I just imagine that must be so wild to them. Um, and then Mexico, I hadn't been till, a birthday trip. I like to do birthday trips along with traveling with my mom. Birthday trips are, I think, if you love your birthday, I think that's a really
Yes,
great gift to yourself.
100%. I'm
Yeah.
with you.
And yeah, going to Mexico, and I lived in New York City then. And it was just sort of working to, like, till the next trip I could go to Mexico, and I lived there briefly. But it's just so profound. I often I find it difficult to put into words. Just the depth of just the warmth and the love and the humor and the values of the Mexican people and their culture. And I also have to remind people that I'm not Mexican. I don't have Mexican heritage, but maybe in a past life. Sometimes I feel connected. But I think just initially focusing on just the two, I think was kind of a little bit of a double edged sword, because again, I've traveled elsewhere, but people think of me for those two. But I see now in my business that that's what people come, know me for, and that's okay. So that's if I can start there. And actually, Japan and Mexico have a great relationship. They have a lot of connection, and I like to find these sort of nuances in their how they're connected. And yeah, and Japan is definitely a very popular destination at the moment. I didn't think that it would become quite as large as it did, but it's good for business. And I think that it's not just about business, but it's like you said with conscious travel. I like to get to the travelers away from just off the beaten path a bit, and so that you're not really contributing as much to over tourism. And yeah, because there's so many places to go, but people tend to visit just like two places mostly.
Right. Yeah. Just looking up the top 10 things to do in a place and just sticking to that. And I'd love to talk with you more about lesser known places to visit. But before that, I'm curious, what are the relations between Japan and Mexico? Because I've never been to Japan. The closest place would be South Korea, but I have been to
Mm-hmm.
Mexico. And for me, like intuitively, I can't connect the two. So can you elaborate
Yeah,
more?
I think at a superficial level, maybe they seem like opposite, but so you have a very colorful, boisterous, like that's Mexico for me. Um, and then Japan maybe is a little bit more subdued and a more, uh, yeah, just what like I mean, there's such a when this comes down to like certain religions too. It's like Buddhism and Shintoism are there, so that shows up in different ways in Japanese culture. But actually, for arts, for architecture, for I was just writing about it, the jacaranda tree, which is native to South America. It came the president in 1930 in Mexico wanted the cherry blossoms, like Washington D.C., but it doesn't get cold enough for cherry blossoms. So a Japanese gardener is the one who decided to bring this flower that's now everywhere in Mexico City, this tree rather. And so, and I think that they're just, I don't know, like the history, it's much longer, both of them. And I think even now with cuisine, Japan has always probably been revered for fine dining, but Mexico in the last 10 years elevated, modern Mexican cuisine has come a long way. And I see Japanese going to Japan and opening things in Mexico, or sorry, in Japan. And mezcal is a good example too. And then in Mexico, I've had some great Japanese cuisine too. So there's just a very big culture exchange. Uh, yeah, that's a little bit more like a little bit deeper. My Japanese friend is like one of their favorite foods is tacos, and they just loved visiting Japan when we got married there. So it was I don't know I like that. That's exciting for me. I think that there's probably Mexicans who wanting to visit Japan and vice versa.
Yeah.
Because I think in
Yeah.
Japan for a long time too, like Mexican cuisine was just seen maybe for some like here it's just maybe not as aesthetically pleasing, and that's shifting too. So it's good. I think it's again it comes back to a little bit of education and open-mindedness.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see the comparisons. I guess as you describe it, yeah, I could totally see the connections. But yeah, going back to getting off the beaten path, what advice do you have for travelers when they visit popular destinations to get more of like we call them, you could say like more local spots or just things off the top 10 things to do in a place.
So yeah, bucket list or Instagram. I mean, Instagram is probably social media is definitely um, probably exacerbated a lot of the over tourism, which is probably important to acknowledge if you're any type of creator. Which is maybe why for going back to say women and safety, you're posting after the fact, or not including locations, you use close friends. There's ways to really kind of protect yourself and also protect kind of where you're going. But I think I would probably go back to just locals, like asking
Mm.
wherever you're staying, if there's a host, maybe it's an apartment, you could ask the host for their favorite places. You could support, if you're women, I love to support women-owned businesses. Entrepreneurship, especially in Mexico, is huge. So I feel like a number of friends and people there own multiple businesses. So I think it's finding, I mean, walking around is like one of the most helpful things. You can just come across somewhere that maybe draws you, inspires you. And if you, or you, maybe you could just wildly pick the place if it's like, I don't know where to go in a certain country, maybe. But I think it's really like locals. I think that if you're saying taking a tour, hiring a local guide, that could be really helpful. Then you're supporting them, supporting the local economy. Using people like myself, travel advisors and travel consultants, is one aspect. But if you're much more of a DIY type of person, then yeah, I think blogs are still very helpful. And maybe if you realize that they are like very popular places, maybe just opt not to go to them. And yeah, I feel like I talked about this at some point in some content, and I'm sort of drawing a blank otherwise. But I think when there's just talking about, it doesn't even have to be just Japan and Mexico, but there's so many regions, province, Canada has provinces, but there's so many states, regions, and within each country. And usually going to just where, say, the largest airport is, maybe going to like the third largest or fourth largest city or place where cruises don't go, perhaps, is also maybe a good thing. Um, yeah, and just kind of getting, I don't know, like away from it all.
Mm.
Bus travel or train travel, right? If there's a good train system, I think that helps you get get off the beaten path and find, where I think I know people in all sorts of places, and I just love to ask them where they're going, where
Mm.
they like to go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so really utilizing like the local people, really trying to engage with them.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Like where, like if it was Madrid and you've been there for a bit, then that might be something I ask you, even if I've been before, because it's always interesting. I think you also get to know people better by their suggestions. Um, yeah.
Hmm. So, in every destination you go to, you make it a point to interact with local people. Like, do you approach people on streets, or like you just kind of ask people at restaurants, or like working in the service area?
I think, I'm trying to think. I did do thorough research. I think depending on the destination. For Paris recently, I must get it from my mother because she's also a very good researcher
Mm.
when she's really focuses in on what she likes. But yeah, then we were staying part of the time. There was a host, or we stayed in an apartment. We didn't really ask. I think I just walked around or looked things up, or sometimes it was just like look on a map. I just love maps. So visually, sometimes it's easy to see, and maybe it's not about the rating, it's just looking at images. Um, or later at a hotel, we did ask the person working there for like vintage shops, favorite brasseries. And I think even if you don't always end up going there at that time, you can keep them in mind for a future visit. Uh, Someone asked me a question in another podcast that I was in, and they're like, "Well, where do you start?" And I was like, "The coffee shop." So you go to a local coffee shop, and then maybe you ask the barista where their favorite like lunch spot is, or I'm just new here and visiting, and it could, if they're pretty busy, maybe you just ask quickly for one recommendation. But I think people are pretty happy too,
Mm-hmm.
showing enthusiasm for where where they live.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think everyone likes giving their opinion, especially if you're somewhere where like tourism is really important to the community. Like the locals are more willing to help you out and kind of show their hospitality through advice. Um,
Yeah,
how do you
yeah.
decide if somewhere is worth visiting if it's not super Well, because I feel like some things are touristy for a reason, right? Like some
Hmm.
things are really worth visiting, even though it may be like crowded. Like there may be a lot of people, there may be a lot of yeah attention around it, but like it's worth visiting. It's touristy for whatever reason. So
Hmm.
things that aren't as touristy, they may not be touristy for like a reason as well. So like, how do you kind of decipher when something is worth your time? Because often we don't have the luxury to waste a day, like taking a day trip somewhere. So we kind of have to, if we are short on time, we kind of have to prioritize certain things. So for me at
Yeah.
least, when I'm planning day trips, I've become really picky about where I go because I don't want to spend 2 hours on the train to go somewhere that I I kind of like, and it's like it turns out there's not a lot
Hmm.
of things to do. You know, I don't know if you have any feedback or insight on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe that's the challenge with shorter travel, right? When you're limited on time, is then you have to be extra discerning. So I think it's maybe asking yourself a question. It's part of conscious travel is what are my interests? I'm more like most deeply curious about, what piques my interest most. Maybe, and then I think sometimes you have a gut feeling about that too. And if I could only choose one, which one would I choose? And like a this or that. I'm not sure if you've heard of human design, but that's helped me a lot with informing decisions. And for large decisions, I need to like sleep on it.
Mm.
But I think there are people who it's just very instinctual. It's like this or that, this cuisine or that cuisine. Do I want to go to this cafe or
Mm.
that cafe? Do I want to see this site or that site? I think actually a good example maybe is with my mom. We were going to do a day trip and we were going to leave Paris, and then we were maybe going to go to Normandy, and then the time it took, maybe it wasn't going to be worth it. Or I told her maybe be focused on it, going a separate time and then just going to that region. So we did end up going to Versailles. There were so many people. I had never been, I think for a good reason. I wasn't as very interested in it, but it is a UNESCO site. It was a lot of people, but then the feeling at the end of it is like you're overwhelmed. It's like so many people that you want to just leave.
Mm.
So would I have gone again? I probably won't repeat it, but it was good that I went
Mm.
because of part of that memory. And it was just like an afternoon. But someone in Paris did say, someone I knew, I mean, she's American, but she says, once you see one, you see them kind of all. So maybe if it's a similar type of, say, architecture or building, maybe it'll be not that different. Um, but I don't know, I guess that's where city residents are usually like some are born and raised in the city, and a lot of people are moving to the city. So maybe if say, because you're in Madrid, when I visited Madrid, the neighbor of the host was the only person who spoke English, but he was from San Sebastian. So later, many years later, when I went to San Sebastian, I asked him for recommendations of like where would you buy this specific pastry. So I keep people in mind. Maybe that's like just my brain as connections, is I keep in touch with people, and I like to keep in touch with people because then I know, because people move. And then when I'm going somewhere or I think of someone or a recommendation, then I like to ask them, as people have often asked me. But yeah, I think I'm gonna have to think a little bit more about that one, Lydia, because I think what I like to recommend, what I asked my clients is really just their interest and what they're interested in. And then that's how I create an itinerary. But that adds space because maybe they do meet a local, they meet someone, there's an opportunity for a different experience. But to really know, I guess it's getting really, maybe even journaling, it's getting to know yourself better of what you really like and enjoy. But then there could be something that's unexpected, right? You go
Mm.
with someone, you meet someone, and then they're like, I'm going on a little trip here, and would you like to go with me? And you never know, that could be like the best experience of your life. So it's hard to say. I think there's only so much you can plan for.
And then to follow up on that would be like, how do we fight this feeling of FOMO when traveling? Like, fear of missing out from like big attractions that may not interest us. Like, yeah, I guess this kind of relates to what you said about knowing yourself. But do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, if that's not the type of traveler you are, then I think you're gonna have probably less FOMO. If you're, it's I have it less. I think I let, not I let. I think as you maybe you just get older, you become more discerning about the people you have around you, the experiences you want to have, and with travel. I think also I actually taught one earlier this year. It's like a travel vision board,
Mm.
creating a work like because images are so powerful, and I think that's what could really help. Like if it was this year, it's not like I have to go, but like if I get to go, where would I love to
Mm.
go? Um, is it something about the people? Is it something, sometimes it could be political, right? Because as a country, right, they have, maybe they're standing up for humanity, and that could drive a decision because your travel dollars or euros or pounds or whoever your listeners um, are powerful, right? So by not traveling to a place, you're also say something. And as many, I think, Canadians are doing right now, the US, yeah, they're choosing to travel elsewhere. And I think that if you're, yeah, the journaling, knowing yourself, do you like to travel alone? Do you want to travel with a friend? I think a lot more solo travel women are averaging age is like 47, and a lot more women who are partnered and are traveling because they're just like, I have the freedom and flexibility and I don't want to wait around. So when you're solo, it's great because you could be pretty selfish. I mean, that might be for some people, that might be an insult, but I think actually it's a compliment. You're like, oh, you're selfish. You're like, yeah, because I prioritize me. And when you travel with others, you kind of have to compromise at different points, right? So for you, Lydia, you just feel like, where do I really, want to go? In like the Schengen or, um, or like this weekend or next weekend, and using also maybe seasons, doing like shoulder off season travel to really help prevent, so you're not adding to the over tourism as much. And I think, yeah, that could be, or when holidays are, I mean, there's a lot of things that could drive your decisions and help inform your decision making.
Mm. Yeah, no, I love all the points you made about solo travel. And I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, if you think about it, it is a selfish thing to do. But I think we kind of stigmatize that word as well. Like, selfish isn't a bad thing, it's just simply focusing on the self. We've kind
Yeah.
of added all these negative connotations. Like, it means that you're taking away from like other people in a sense, but you're not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
solo travel is all about just knowing what you want and like going for it despite other people.
Yeah.
So,
Or if you don't know what as much of what you want, I think you'll start to figure it out. I think that's what traveling helps you to do is,
that too.
like Lydia, I think you're, yeah, a little bit younger than me, but I think like as you have your travels, then I think that's going to help your decision making for the future too. Whether it's a day trip or a longer trip. And I think that yourself, but it's like the intention behind it, right? Because you're traveling alone, and sure, maybe that's selfish. I have the time and flexibility to do so. I don't want to wait for others, but it's because I want to support and connect with people there, in a place, in a country. Yeah, so and I think solo travel, for me, my experience, maybe for most, is also very subjective. I think you end up being much more open to opportunities to connect with other people when you're alone. You're probably more likely to be approached. That could be a good or a bad thing, but yeah, I've made some great friendships in adulthood because I was traveling with a friend, really, but I'm still in touch with certain people because of even travels I took with others. I'm the one that kept in touch. Maybe that's my little piece of advice, is that there's a power in continuing to connect with others even after you've met them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I echo everything you said about just letting yourself be more open to a place, letting yourself just, I guess let the destination carry you where you're meant to go and just trust the process. I think that's
Yeah,
what solo travel is about as well, for sure.
yeah.
To wrap up, if there's one piece of actionable advice you'd like to give travelers to like implement to make their experiences more conscious, what would it be?
Yeah, that's okay. That's a great question. I think it starts before you even, or say some people like book a flight maybe and then they figure out the trip. But if you have the time and the space that you're not even, you're not sure where to go, I think it's actually really using a prompt or journaling if you do, or even if you want to do a voice note to yourself, is like if there's a place you have in mind, why do you want to go there? Like, what is it about the place? Because if it's like FOMO on someone's Instagram, on someone's story, then maybe that's not. I don't know that comes as much from like a place of depth, right?
Mm,
It might not be as true to who you are. Or if you don't have an idea, they're like, what types of places, what kind of things interest you, and just writing about it, and then slowly finding, maybe a place that. And solo travel, it could be like the next town over, it could be like the next region, the next state. You could start small if you've never really traveled before, and that's what I also like to advise, like the suggestion I like to give, because it doesn't have to be that your first time is going to be crossing an ocean. It could just be that you dine alone for some people if they haven't done that yet. I love, there's like an example in Sex and the City that I like to mention usually, where Carrie has trouble like dining alone. And then when she finally does, but there's like a liberation to that too. And I think that gives confidence to yourself. So it's like kind of just dipping your toes, but really that journaling, just taking that time and space to ask yourself those questions of your interest. And again, it's okay to be selfish. Like, why are you interested? What do you have a heritage? Is there ancestral? I mean, that I think that kind of travel has become much bigger lately too. So there could be a connection there.
I love that question. Like, why do you want to travel to this place? Why am I compelled to take this trip? I love that. And I'm going to start doing that every time I take a trip now because I think it makes your experience more meaningful too. Like, not only are you kind of being more mindful about your intentions, but when you're there, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of can reflect in a greater depth. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like that a
Yeah,
lot.
exactly. That like speaks to a lot to like why I do what I do. It's then you can enjoy the experiences while you're having them. If you can add, spaciousness, but then you are being mindful, you're being more intentional, and then your where you go or what you do can actually you could just refer back to what you wrote,
Mm.
right? And that may change, and that's okay. You can add, we're all human, give ourselves grace. But then also like at the end of your trip when you come home and like, I mean, I think it just sometimes makes experience in your memories that much more special.
Yeah, definitely. I think journaling is just like the key to everything.
Yeah, and I find myself, I'll be honest, everyone, I need to get back to journaling. I say these things. But I think that's also where the vision board comes in. If you want to take like the next step, when I taught that workshop, I did the vision boarding part, I did the journaling, and then we made the vision board. So if that's what you want to take, the next step after is just digital in Canva. There's templates like, or you can just do the like magazine. I mean, I don't own it or buy magazines anymore because it's also more stuff. But you could just do a digital, and I keep like you can put in a wallpaper. I keep it on my phone. I have a different one on my laptop, and then you see it all the time. And there's power to that. So
Oh, cool. And do you have any like platforms you use to specifically do it on, like Pinterest or Instagram?
Canva is the one
Oh, okay.
usually.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you have a personal Pinterest, sure you could make like images board with other people's images. But I think Canva allows you a lot of creativity. You could just have a blank even, or like I mentioned, a template, um, and then you can put the year, and then it's there's. I know you just went to Morocco. Morocco is one of the ones that I have later this year for 2025, but I don't
Oh.
always make it a year. Maybe sometimes there's places where I realize I'm not supposed to visit them yet, and like
Mm.
later, many years down the road, I reflect and I was like, this is why. Like I was supposed to go to, Morocco in 2020, and then 2020 happened, and maybe it's because I hadn't met more Moroccan friends who have connections and family and suggestions, right? And learning about it, given that I'm in the travel industry, meeting people with businesses in Morocco, for example. So I think sometimes there's like a not now or not yet. Or maybe the universe or a higher power will give you a nudge there too. But
Yes.
yeah, but Canva, I really like Canva for that.
Okay. No, that's
And you
such.
can just the free plan. I
Okay,
totally
yeah.
like badging for the free plan. I used to have a paid plan, and actually now I just figured out workarounds. So we don't always have to add more expenses as business owners or people,
Yeah,
but
no, going
you
back
could
to what
still
you
support, yeah,
what you said in the
platforms.
beginning, like it's sometimes the answer that's most simple is like the I don't know, the answer that you need.
It's kind of in your face, yeah. Sometimes it's like
Yes.
staring you in your face, or like the people that you know around you, depending on where you live. You're like, oh, I suddenly have a lot of French friends. You know, there's maybe something to that, right?
Yes.
A language, or and starting. Yeah, we didn't get into that, but that's a whole nother subject. I think that helps inform just knowing some phrases when you travel, because then you can ask maybe someone for their favorite place to visit, or
Right.
just to say hello. Yeah, yeah. I think that breaks not barriers. That's a very strong way to put it, but I think that helps um, sometimes connecting with locals quicker.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It just shows that you're willing to put that extra effort in
Yeah,
to respect
yeah,
the community
yeah,
you're in.
yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Well, I have one last round of like rapid fire questions, I like to call them. The first
Okay.
question is, what is your dream destination?
Hmm. That's a good one. Oh, I think one of the top spent for many years is India.
Mm,
Yeah, India. Yeah, for many years. I have this year, but then it's in general for many years it's been India. Yeah.
okay. And two, what is a memorable meal you've had when traveling? I know it may be hard to
Oh,
pick as a foodie.
memorable meal. Oh, there's been so many. Um, I think I'll choose one just because whatever comes up, right? So a few years ago, my now husband and my mom and I all went to Greece, and it was a little bit after her birthday. But there's a chef that I worked with in New York, and he worked at the restaurant in Greece in Mykonos, and it was a lunch, and it was beautiful, and it made her feel really special, and it was also delicious. So we were like literally right by the water. There's like caves and
Oh,
rocks, but I think that was a really memorable meal because of how special she felt and how much she talks about it still. Yeah, yeah, and to see my friend too.
beautiful. And lastly, what is a special place in your heart? You could pick like a city, a certain, I don't know, location within a country.
Oh, this is, you think it'd be hard, but it's actually Oaxaca City.
Ah,
Yeah, that was the first place that my now husband and I traveled to as a couple, and we got married there. We had a very intimate, very, very small ceremony supporting a lot of local vendors just over a year ago, fall of 2023.
ah.
And they have also dealt with over tourism, drought. So maybe be mindful of when you travel there, look that up. But it's truly special. The people are incredible. The food, and yeah, yeah, the Oaxacan cuisine is what has basically brought about like the Mexican cuisine that is today. It's a big part of it. So if you want to connect with gastronomy, Mexican cuisine gastronomy, then Oaxaca is a place to go.
That's probably the first city I want to visit when I go back to Mexico. I haven't visited yet. Okay,
Yeah.
amazing. With that, thank you so much for your time. If you want, you could give a shout out to where we could find you, where we could connect, and I'll leave it all in the show notes, of course, as well.
Yeah, sure. I hang around on Instagram a lot, right? So it's my handle. The handle of my business is at Puebla York Inc. pardon me, BLAYORKINC, and then my website is pueblayorkinc.com. And Yeah, and then oh right, and then she had mentioned I do have a podcast. So Soul
Yes.
Wanderer, you can find it on Spotify, Apple. Yeah, so
Okay,
that's a good
amazing.
resource.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Lydia.
Thank you so much, Sequoia. I really loved everything we talked about today.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm reaching out. We'll continue to connect.
Thank you so much for listening to the God of Case Wanderlust podcast. Again, my name is Lydia, and you can find me on social media in the About section of this podcast. Please rate and review if you found value or insight from this, and I hope to see you in the next episode.